Hi, everyone. This is the first edition of Go Teen Writers Live. So the way this works is that on Fridays at goteenwriters.com, Shannon Dittamore posts writing exercises. And for those who play along and they submit a post, then Shannon will pick a random winner and they get the chance to ask a question. So this is our first time doing this, and we are answering a couple of questions today.
Yeah, we're very excited. Our two random winners, the first one was Hadley Grace. And I'm going to pose this question first to Jill, and then the three of us will kind of discuss. So Jill, Hadley is asking, how do you know where to begin and end chapters? Chapter structure is one of my biggest weak spots, and I'm going to have to full body tackle it. I like that image. While working on the second draft of my work in progress. I ignored it during the first draft, but now I'm petrified by the thought of fixing it. So chapter endings, Jill.
Okay. We were gonna let Stephanie handle that one first.
Oh, that's what I meant. Did I say that? Stephanie's gonna answer the question.
All right, first time. Here we go. Okay, so
we're gonna do a bloopers edition.
So this one I think is interesting because for me it's kind of a feel. Like there's a part of it that's technical, but there's also a part of it that is oh, this feels like the right place to start a chapter, or this feels like the right place to end. So I don't know if that's something that you eventually get to, or if that's something that the more you write, the more you're going to feel where it should begin and end. But from a technical standpoint, I think it goes back to the advice to arrive late and to leave early. So you want to start the scene as close to the action as possible. You don't want to have to lay a lot of pipe to get to the interesting part of the scene. But I think before you can even pick like where that starting place is, that you have to know what the purpose of the scene is. You have to ask, what is the scene doing? What does my character want? What's at stake for them in this scene? And what change is going to take place? How does the scene turn the story? Before you can really decide, that means this is the best place to start, and that means this is the best place to end.
Yeah, I like that. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, that's good stuff. I wanted to throw out there that I don't suggest you really worry about this too much if you're writing your first draft. I feel like you just need to get the words on the page, and then you can go back and try to do that as you're rewriting and you're doing your edits. But so there's different ways you could end. I have a bunch of ideas for that. You could end with a hook, you could end in the middle of action, you could end with a powerful statement, or you could have the hero recap as he's reeling from what just happened to him, things like that. Maybe a glimpse of what's to come. And as far as beginnings go, another thing I just wanted to throw out there is if you're going to do chapter titles, sometimes chapter titles can give a glimpse as to what's going to happen in the chapter. Sometimes you don't want to do that, but that's an interesting way. Rick Riordan does that in Percy Jackson books, and it's really fun to give a glimpse of what's going to happen in the chapter.
He has the best titles. He does.
They're really fun. So I do have, we've written blog posts on these, so we'll put some links in the comments in case you haven't seen those posts, and you can go check them out.
Yeah, I went through my work in progress just to kind of give Hadley an idea. And I actually have, and this is actually a book that's out on submission right now, so it's gone through some edits, it's gone through my agent. And the funny thing is sometimes online you'll find advice, and someone will say your chapters should always be, between 2,000 and 3,000 words long. And I was kind of curious where I fell in that, because I'm much of, like Steph talked about, I'm very much a feel writer. And my chapters I have one that's only 1,000 words, 1,012 words, and I have one that's actually 4,000 words. So I think you can have a range, and I think that some chapters you'll know when to stop, it'll be much easier. But I think the trick is to, when you're done drafting, as Jill said, go back through and read your endings and see, does it make you want to turn the page? Because if it doesn't, then you've done something that needs a little work. And that's okay, because we all have that in first drafts. But, chapter endings are fun to edit and fun to play with. And as long as your story is continuing to move forward, you're always going to have at least something to edit. And I think that's what you should do. Being able to find that perfect stopping place is fun. I actually think you'll enjoy it when you go back to do it.
And I think it's important too that when we talk about the end of a chapter having a hook or having something to bring the readers back for, that we don't necessarily mean that every chapter ends with like a dun 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 kind of moment. Right. That it can just be, it can be something subtle. It can be just something, it's something that just makes the reader ask like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen now because of this information that's just unfolded. So don't think that every chapter needs to have some great cliffhanger at the end of it. Like that'll exhaust your readers. So it's okay. It's okay for it to be a subtle thing.
It tends to feel episodic too if you always have this massive, if you're climaxing at the end of every single chapter. It feels very, very like episodic, and people are expecting an ending all the time. Yeah. And I think that, you know, if there's an ending every time, you're happy to put the book away and come back to it. So later, so you kind of want to keep them asking for more.
There is the occasion when somebody's writing that way on purpose, though. And if you're that kind of writer, that's okay. If you want to be that kind of, where you do it that way on purpose because that's the type of story you're telling.
Sure.
Want anyone to think there's only one way to do this. No. One chapter might end that way and one chapter might not. So.
Yeah. And it's great because it comes back to that idea of knowing the rules well enough to excel and get to that place where you get to break them whatever the heck you want, because you know why you're doing it and you're doing it intentionally. So yeah. Should we do the next question?
Yes.
Okay, and this one is going to Jill, right?
Yes, this one goes to Jill.
We're just going to do a bloopers episode. Okay, so this was kind of a long question, and it was asked by, I'm going to mess the name up, I know, but it's J. Laisa maybe, or Lisa. But she gave us a little paragraph of kind of where she is in her story. And I'm just going to kind of read the question, which may be out of context, but we'll try to help frame that as we answer it. So she asks this: is there any way to make an opposing plot and story world coexist peacefully without losing what you liked about either one? So she's looking for tips on plot and world building, making those kind of mesh together when they seem to be kind of disparate. So Jill, did you want to start?
Sure. I think it's a mistake to have a super cool, awesome world for no reason, just because you want it to be cool. You want to have a purpose for what's cool about your world. Maybe not everything, but so that it will interact with your plot. So look for ways in which your story world can intersect with your plot and your characters and their growth. It's not easy to do. Your plot and what you're working on and what's broken, what feels broken on it. It's really hard to offer advice, but some questions. Ask yourself, will the story world change at all throughout goes along? If not, what are some ways that maybe it could? Characters are interacting with it, or vice versa. My characters are changing and the world is causing them to change. When I say world, that could be so many things. It could be the government, creatures, communication, magic, all kinds of different parts. It doesn't have to be all those things. You could just pick one element of your story world that the characters are going to interact with, and it's going to become an integral part of your plot. You could also ask yourself how your characters are challenged or hindered by those elements in the story world, changed by it, enabled by it. Look for ways that you can use story world to affect your characters' lives and the story and the journey that they're on. So yeah, that should help. I think if you can do that, and that will help you make it mesh a little better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Jill. I think that having a world without a purpose is going to be problematic, unless, of course, your world is, I think of the Night Circus and everything was built. She built her plot around the location, around the Night Circus. And I think that you can do that. But the truth is, you asked the question, is there any way to make them coexist peacefully? And I want to say this, is that something at some point is going to have to give. Your plot is either going to be the thing that's driving your story, or it's going to be this story world. And neither one is negative, but at some point you have to realize that your book, while you like the tone of certain things, you like the feel of these fantastical books that maybe you want to place in your book, you are going to have to fill your book with scenes. And so that's going to require people to talk. It's going to require things to happen. You're going to have setting and dialogue and description. And as you kind of get into the nitty-gritty part of writing, some of that story world stuff that felt, the tone of it felt so awesome, you're going to feel like you're losing a little bit of that because you're working, you're hard at work now. And what I want to say is to push through that and write. At some point, especially when you get through that chapter or through that scene, or you get to even the end of the book, you're going to realize something was driving it. It was either more about the world or more about the plot, your dialogue, your structure. And I want to like just encourage you to be okay with that, because the creative process started with this world idea that you have, and maybe it had to change because, like Jill said, your world has to have a purpose, and it's okay for your plot, your structure, however you want to look at that, even the dialogue of your characters, to change your world. And that's almost necessary as you're drafting, especially if you're trying to start from just a feel or a tone or a fantastical idea. It's good for your characters to require you to make adjustments, especially if you write by the seat of your pants. You're learning your story as you go. This is going to be difficult to have an opposing plot and kind of time period or frame or characters opposing things. If you're somebody who's got a plot structure out beforehand, you're going to run into a lot of these problems before you even put pen to the page and start writing. So I would be okay with, I want to just like, my advice is to push through. It's just keep writing and kind of see where your plot takes you with this. You started with a fantastical story world. Now let's see where your plot takes you and see if it's a smash up that can continue to exist.
So I have a question as somebody who does not write fantasy or in this genre at all. Like, how does character play into that? Because we keep talking about plot and story world. Like, how does that, for me with my realistic fiction, I know that so much of the story world is through the character's eyes, but also it's where I try to expose how they feel about the story world. Like, is that true for fantasy as well? Is that, like, how does the character come to play in that?
Jill, you go.
Absolutely. Talked about I'm thinking about Lost Girl, and Piper goes into the dangerous parts of the city and she starts to discover that world, and what she discovers does and eventually change her in a way. And so that's her interacting with the world, and that's true for fantasy novels. With yours, she's in a different environment. It's as simple as that, and with different people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
You know, these are different things that challenge her and who she is, and the fears and the things that are in her past, and that she's going to be challenged by. And that would be, you know, and you could insert a character learning magic, or a character, you know, getting promoted in the ranks of a certain type of a military in a fantasy world. Any of these kinds of things that are world kind of going into a different place, and that place should affect them in some way. I mean, they could go into a world and they would feel totally comfortable and love it, and that's okay too. But we always want our characters to be we want things to get in the way of our character's goal. And so if you can get your world in the way in any way, shape, or form that challenges their goal, then that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that if you've created a world where your characters have enough power to kind of throw it off, like then you've got some thinking to do, you know. And I think that one of the things that I'm always about, I think you get better at writing by writing. And so my advice is always to kind of write through some of that. And one of the things we try to accomplish with the writing exercises is to put some boundaries in place and force you to work inside those boundaries, because it stretches your creativity. And I think this is one of those areas that could really showcase that. If you put some boundaries in place with your world, and you've now dropped some characters into that, if you want to, for a little bit, to let your story world rule the day, let your characters figure out a way to work within this theme, this tone, and this story world. And maybe you're going to find something magical. And I think that it should develop character stuff. We should find characterization in that. If we don't, you got to kind of rethink where you're going.
Yeah, those are good thoughts. Do you guys have anything else, or should we leave it here for this time?
I'm good. What about you?
I'm good.
All right. All right. Well, make sure to check out the blog on Fridays when Shannon posts new exercises to get a chance to ask your questions. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye.